is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have ourselves another jam-packed show for you all, as we had a lot of volleyball happening over the weekend, as Long Beach State flexed its muscle and took down number 2 UCLA at the Pyramid. It was a phenomenal performance, as Long Beach State and UCLA face each other again this week. Can the Beach pull off an encore performance, or will UCLA have something to say about that? And how about UC Irvine knocking off number 5 Pepperdine, number 4 Pepperdine at that? How did those Anteaters do it? And how about UC Santa Barbara taking down Grand Canyon? And UC San Diego, the Big West Conference really showed out, as UC San Diego beat BYU on the road twice. And Ball State continues to roll, as they open up MIVA play with 2 wins, one of which was against Lewis. Darn right impressive. Hand me a volleyball, set up the net, and I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Tuesday or Monday evening. Sorry about the little bit of a delayed start. We had a little technical issues here and there, and unfortunately, I was unable to start on time. So my apologies to everyone who is basically wondering where the heck I was when it came to starting on time at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 9 p.m. Eastern. But without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. But first and foremost, we have a word from our sponsors. iSports Radio is sponsored by the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get film to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get the second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on Twitter at SoCal Warriors, on Instagram at Southern California _Warriors, and you can also follow them on Facebook by typing in the word Southern California and then Warriors. iSports Radio's second sponsor is Background Check International Businesses. Are you looking to background check a new hire on? Let Kit Freeman take care of that for you. Kit has founded and managed Background Check International Businesses since 1994, and he's here to help you with the screening process. Contact Kit and let him help make the hiring process that much easier, because background checks are always an important part of any sort of hiring process in any big organization. This business is used for professional background checks and not for the use of any crimes such as identity theft or any other illegal activity. They do not have Instagram and Twitter, but they do have the Book of Faces, aka Facebook, as they are on Facebook by typing the word Background Check International, then put a dash, then BCI. They also have a website, www.bcint.com. And then iSports Radio is on Twitter and Instagram at iSports Radio. And they're also on Facebook by typing the word IE, then sports, then radio. They also have their website, www.iesportsradio.com. When you go to that website, you will see a Patreon link with 5 different tiers, with the first one starting off at $5 a month. That donation will give you a shout-out from all 29 of our shows. Higher tiers include iSports Radio merchandise, access to our podcasting university, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment. Because for the last 7.5 years, iSports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and even other authorized media personnel, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, iSports Radio has been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans, and with your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you, everyone, for continuing to help support iSports Radio and to continue to make iSports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. And we want to give a shout out to iSports Radio's Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, and Marcus Losgreat. And then the iSports Radio Fan of the Month is at Spuds Chat. He is a Rams fan hailing from San Diego, and he is probably ecstatic after the Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl yesterday, as they were able to defeat the Cincinnati Bengals, for those of you wondering. But we're not here to talk football. We're here to talk some volleyball. And back to Spuds Chat, though. He has been a guest on 3 and Out throughout the playoffs, and he was featured on the final primetime face-off. Unfortunately, he didn't come out on top, but he fought valiantly, and it was a close primetime face-off. All right. Now, without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. So, obviously, we have to recap the match of the week from last week. UCLA at Long Beach State, number 2 versus number 1. And Long Beach State basically brought out the brooms, and they swept UCLA. It was just an amazing effort overall from Long Beach State. Their kill leader was not Alex Nikolov or Spencer Olivier. It was actually Clark Godbold. He had 17 kills, only 1 hitting error on 28 swings for a hitting percentage of .571. That was darn right impressive, and Clark really showed his stuff. And it was very impressive to see him having, I wouldn't call it a coming out party, but he just brought his A game, and I don't know if Long Beach decided to go to him on purpose just because everyone knows that Long Beach State has Alex Nikolov and Spencer Olivier as their 2 big outside hitters. But Clark Godbold finally had his big-time game. He had a career high in kills in terms of the college scene. But this game just had everything and more. Like, it had amazing plays, which could have made ESPN's top 10, as one play was Mason Briggs keeping the ball alive with his foot, and it was just phenomenal. I know some of y'all probably saw the clips. Unfortunately, I didn't get the best angle of Mason saving the ball with his foot, but he just saved it, and eventually Godbold got the kill, and that was that. Another big-time play for Long Beach State that they had was Aiden Knipe, as it looked like he was going to be swinging for the ball and trying to get the kill, but instead he faked it as he set the ball to Godbold, and you guessed it, he slammed down a kill, and everyone in the Pyramid was just rocking. I also should mention that the Pyramid had over 3,000 attendees, and this was actually the first time the Pyramid could have a lot of attendees. Like, at first it was half capacity, I want to say, and then they pretty much modified it to full capacity. So it was really electric. It's obviously a big-time match whenever Long Beach State and UCLA meet in volleyball, whether it's women's or men's. It's quite impressive. And Long Beach State was led by Clark Godbold, who had those 17 kills. Alex Nikolov had 11 kills. He hit 400. And he also chipped in 9 digs, which was quite impressive. And then Spencer Olivier had 7 kills. Didn't quite have the night he was hoping for, but when you have other players stepping up, you don't need to have the big night that you obviously wanted, as it's a team sport, and you have to put the team ahead of you. Mason Briggs also had 10 digs to lead the Long Beach State defense, while Aiden Knipe had 32 assists. Long Beach State as a whole hit 400, and they had 4 service aces, and only missed 10 serves, which wasn't bad. And then their blocks was pretty decent as well, as they had 7 blocks as a whole compared to UCLA's 4. So, not too shabby if you ask me. UCLA, on the other hand, they did not have one player in double digits in kills, but they were led by Ido David, who had 9 kills. And then Ethan Champlin chipped in 7 kills, and Merrick McHenry added 6 kills. In terms of assists, Miles Partain chipped in 26 assists. and they didn't have too many digs. They only had 20 digs as a whole, and then Miles Partain added 8 of those digs. And as a team, UCLA hit 271, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't necessarily all that great, just because, well, compared to Long Beach State's 400, I don't know, it just was not that impressive, and obviously they ran into a buzzsaw in Long Beach State, but I expected a little bit better from UCLA. But they did have their moments in the first set. It looked as if they were going to take the first set, because Long Beach State got off to another slow start, but then UCLA just couldn't close the deal. As Long Beach State, being the gritty and resilient team that they are, they managed to make a little bit of a comeback in the later stages of the first set. As you all saw on Twitter, I basically said, sometimes you just don't have to start off strong in order to win a set. As long as you win the points that truly matter, that's what matters in terms of winning or losing a set. And honestly, Long Beach State demonstrated that, and it was quite impressive that Long Beach was able to take that first set, because it seems like the first set seems to be their worst enemy throughout most of these matches. It was their worst enemy against USC last week, where they got drubbed, probably their worst first set of the season. They lost a late lead to Ohio State. They nearly lost a late lead to Penn State. So I think winning that first set is like, what's the word? It basically shows how resilient they are, and it best describes them as gritty in terms of the first set. Now, the second set was also pretty close. Long Beach State actually led throughout most of the way, but for UCLA, they just did not quit. They wanted to even the match at 1-1, and they had their chances. Unfortunately, they were able to survive one set point, and they nearly pushed it to a deuce game, but unfortunately for UCLA, they just could not score that 24th point, as I think it was Shane Holdaway had the kill off the overpass to give Long Beach State the second set and the 2-0 lead in the match. And then the third set, everything kind of fell apart for UCLA, as first of all, they had a hitting error to start the third set, and then they kept getting aced. Basically, nothing went their way, and then also Miles Partain kind of dinged his ankle as he ran into the scorer's table, and that is not fun. He did that just because he wanted to keep the ball in play, and it was unfortunate, and I feel for the guy. That's basically trying to sacrifice your body to keep the ball in play. So, all in all, UCLA just got drubbed in that third set. But my old saying goes, it's better to lose now than lose in conference play, or sometime where it's important down the road. As honestly, UCLA just did not have it that night. Again, it might have been because the first two sets, they kind of got the wind knocked out of their sails, and it was draining losing those first two close sets. But you have to be resilient on the road. As we say hello to Gina G in the chat room, she says, "Hi, Teran, have an amazing show as always, and happy Valentine's Day. She'll be listening in for the whole show." Thanks, Gina. I appreciate that, and happy Valentine's Day to you. And happy Valentine's Day to all the volleyball fans out there. But for UCLA, this was obviously a big punch to the mouth. Other than the first two sets, UCLA just didn't have that it factor. But I think UCLA will use this as motivation to just try to be better prepared. Obviously, the last time prior to this, when these two teams met at the Pyramid, UCLA snapped Long Beach State's, I think it was 44 or 45 home game winning streak, which dated all the way back to, I think, 2016, if I want to say. Not quite sure on that, but it was a long winning streak, and that was kind of irrelevant at the time, considering, well, again, losses happen. Losing is pretty much inevitable for the most part. So, for UCLA and Long Beach State, to me, at the Pyramid, in a packed house, it was quite intense, and it was a barn burner. And for those of you that don't believe me, head on over to the Set Point Twitter account and take a look-see at how packed it was when it came to the Pyramid. So let's actually jump to the post-game interviews that I had with Alan Knipe and one of the players. Before I jump into that, I should also make note that Long Beach State started at middle blocker Grant Maroki. Normally they had been starting Simon Torwey, and then along with Shane Holdaway, but instead Alan Knipe decided to go with Grant Maroki, and it was basically it worked out for him. Although Grant did not have the numbers, he only had 2 kills and he had 2 block assists. It actually worked to perfection, and Grant Maroki made the most of his minutes. So I talked to head coach Alan Knipe, and I also asked a question to Maroki about how it felt to getting the nod when it came to starting.
Good evening, Coach. So, a couple weeks ago you talked about how deep your middles are. What can you say about Grant and how he was able to perform well despite it not being shown on the numbers?
Well, yeah, I think Grant did a whole bunch of things for us. One, he blocked a couple of balls in key moments. He killed the balls that he got set, and he served opportunities to get him out of system with his jump float, just like we get from Aiden's jump float. But Grant brought a lot of energy to the court, and what you don't see a lot of times what a middle blocker does is the calmness of the block and defense of the systems and what we're trying to do to stop them in different rotations. And Grant worked real hard. He always worked real hard, but he was prepped this week, and he did a great job communicating with McKay and Nick Amato during the match, and I thought he did a real seamless job of getting the information in what we were trying to do. There wasn't a whole lot of barking from me to the court. These guys were dialed in.
And this is a question for Grant. Obviously, you got the start at middle. What was that feeling like for you getting the start at the middle blocker position, considering the middle blocker position is pretty much one of the deepest parts of your team?
It's great. You won't see a lot of the middles being on the court right now, but during our practices and our trainings, it's great to have that kind of depth, and it really helps having guys like Clark and Alex when they're killing their ball, because it opens up a lot of opportunities for us as well as middles. And so I actually enjoy the depth that we have. It creates a lot of competition for us and helps us in moments like this to be ready to play.
All right, and this is a question for Alan. Obviously, your team was strong offensively. UCLA only had 20 digs. And what can you say about your team's passing and your team's overall offense as next week you play UCLA at the John Wooden Center and not Poly Pavilion?
Yeah, we played a really good team who has a long history of trying to be very, very aggressive serving. So to pass the ball as well as we did and hit 400 means that the credit goes to some really good sticks for killing the ball, but the passing and setting was great tonight.
So those are my questions that I asked Alan Knipe and Grant Maroki. Obviously, there were more media members involved, so I had to basically condense it. So those were basically my questions, but all in all, I really think Long Beach State played probably their best game of the season, just because most of their matches had actually been going either 4 or 5. Well, 5 with the lone exception of that Penn State match, but they've mainly been going 4 with the exception of a few. So honestly, I really think this was Long Beach State's big matchup that they had, and it was probably their most effective and their most cleanest match they had all season for the most part. And I did make note that UCLA and Long Beach State are playing one another at the John Wooden Center and not Poly Pavilion. The John Wooden Center is basically they're basically the equivalent of the small gym at UCLA. It's not Poly Pavilion just because it's not like a big old stadium and whatnot, just because it has something to do with like makeup games in basketball and other events happening. So to me, I think it's still going to be volleyball, and both teams have to come prepared when it comes to playing at the John Wooden Center. And I also got to catch up with UCLA men's volleyball coach John Speraw, who is a volleyball icon in terms of coaching, on UCLA's performance and what they need to do in order to switch up things against Long Beach State as the two play each other on Friday. All right, John. So obviously tonight was a little bit of a rough night for you all. What can you say about tonight, and what positives can you take away from this match going into your next match?
There's a lot of positives. I know the third set was a real stinger. First two sets, though, were really well played. We got down in that second set and made a set of it. And after the second set, I was feeling pretty good. I was feeling like we were doing some good things and had an opportunity to improve in some other areas. Obviously, they got going in the third set, and I know Miles tweaked himself, and then that got us a little out of rhythm on some swings and stuff. Things didn't go our way at all in that set. So I think there's a lot that we can take from it. At this point of the season, I think you just want to get challenged and figure out where you can improve. And the thing I do like about our team right now is that from a foundation perspective, from the framework of who we are as a team, we're deep and we have some really nice talent. And so I think the ability to look at where we need to improve and have some optimism about how we can do that is strongly there. I know if there's teams in the past where you have holes and you just know that those holes are tough to fill, and you're going to try and work on some other areas to try and strengthen that as a counterweight. And that's not how I feel about this team. This is a team where I feel like, hey, we can make significant improvements in a number of areas, and we have depth, so our trainings are really good, and I think we can get there. So I'm feeling disappointed by the way the match ended, but optimistic about where we can continue to grow.
Who are some players that stood out to you tonight, as there was a mixed bag of players that had some good key moments?
Right. I think our middles went pretty well tonight. We just didn't pass quite well enough to give them the ball that we needed, and I think we all of our pin hitters kind of were not bad, but just okay. They're all in the 200s, and we can't be there. We got to be better. And a lot of those were on out-of-system swings. We just have to get better at killing the ball when we have opportunities and trans. And when they have a big block up, what are we doing with those plays? Because they fundamentally on defense were better than we were both at the net and the backcourt.
You were rotating two liberos, as I saw Cole Pender and Matt Aziz. Mm-hmm. What can you say about that little experiment, or was it just trying to give Pender a little breather?
No, it wasn't about a breather. Usually I don't have to worry about giving liberos breathers. So I think it had more to do with us trying to figure out if we could scrap up a few more digs. Aziz has shown as a young player in our gym that he has the capacity to be a really good defender. Nothing really came his way tonight. I'm going to look at that on video and see. And then the other aspect of that decision is setting and transition, and Pender's very, very good at that. So you're right, it was a bit of an experiment. I'll go back this weekend and take a look at it.
Your kill leading was a bit of a mixed bag, as Ito David led you all with 9 kills, and then there was just Merrick, and then Guy, and then Colt K. What can you say about your offense and how it could have probably gotten a bit more big kills?
Yeah, I think a lot of those, to me, were our connection overhead early, I thought, was the story of the first two sets. It just, Miles wasn't really connecting very well with Ito, and so Ito didn't get going. And again, looking at that, I see that as a solvable issue. That is reps in the gym, connection between setters and hitters are always something you can improve, but it's very attainable. There are some other aspects of our offense right now that I'm aware are a little predictable, and so we even talked about what those aspects were, and sure enough, we saw some ability for Long Beach to execute on those things tonight. And so that's another reason why I think tonight was really good for us, because it highlights some things we need to train.
Obviously, Long Beach State has a bunch of big hitters, as number 23 and number 31 are their top hitters, but number 12 had himself a big game tonight.
He sure did.
Yeah, what can you say about that? And did you expect them to go to number 12 at all?
Well, did I expect it? Sure. I mean, their pins are 3 really, really good pins. I mean, there's a number of teams in the country this year that have very good pin hitters, and Long Beach has some of the best. I think Nikolov is going to get a significant number of kills, even when you put a good defense in front of him. He's just so big and powerful and does some really advanced things. And Olivier didn't have the match that he's capable of having, but Godbold was great. And I know that in any particular night, you're going to have some players play a little bit better than others, and tonight Godbold had a great match.
And then next game is against Long Beach State at John Wooden Center, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so yeah, just need to clarify that. So next game is Long Beach State versus you all in the John Wooden Center. What's it going to take to take down Long Beach, and how will playing at the Wooden Center differentiate from playing at Pauley?
It's a little different. Obviously, it's a little different. It's a smaller arena. We would prefer to play in Pauley, but scheduling at this time, especially with all the basketball, COVID, makeup mat games, makes it challenging. So it's a little different, but we'll have a nice crowd, and it'll be fun, and we'll go play a good volleyball match and see if we can improve a little bit. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, we have to serve and pass better. We didn't do a great job of that, and give ourselves some more opportunities in transition. So I think we'll be looking at those two areas.
And then MPSF play is almost underway, as Pepperdine has kind of been a little up and down. BYU is still trying to figure things out. Grand Canyon has Gardini. USC is kind of... They're having a solid start. And then Stanford and Concordia are still unknown for the most part. What's it going to take to do well in MPSF play?
I think for us, it's using matches like we had tonight, identifying areas where we need to continue to improve, and then go into the gym and train at every opportunity we have to improve in those areas. If, for example, we pass the ball a little bit better, execute on defense a little bit better, kill the ball out of system a little bit better, shore up some of our connections, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm not necessarily at this point thinking about the first MPSF match, which is Concordia. I'll get there as soon as we get through next Saturday against Long Beach. One step at a time here, as I think. And listen, there's some really good teams in the MPSF. I know BYU graduated a lot last year. Grand Canyon, you mentioned Gardini. It's Gianni, and and he is exceptional. And they return a lot of veteran. That's a veteran team, which is unusual in our league. And Pepperdine's really physical. And we're going to have enough great matches through conference to continue to challenge us, to continue to show us where we need to improve, and then we're going to go and do the work. And if we do the work and make the changes we need, then we'll be in a good position come May. But that's a challenge. You know, we rolled out 5 sophomores, a junior, and a senior, or and a junior today. So five sophomores, a freshman, and a junior. So I mean, we're still in a learning phase, and so we have to think how quickly. To me, it's about time. Are we going to get where we need to be by the end of this season, or is it going to be early next season? And I would definitely prefer the former. So that's our task at hand.
So that was my interview with John Speraw, the UCLA men's volleyball coach. He gave me a lot of good insight. I feel a little bad because I said I'd be quick and painless with him. But regardless, he did say that the team did not serve and pass all that well. And passing the ball is just key. They have to pass well if they want to beat a team like Long Beach. And he does have a young starting lineup, as I was like, I didn't even recognize some of these faces until I saw them in a match against, I think it was Penn State or Ohio State. Regardless, they have some young players, and they have depth on their team. It's just all about them just growing up not growing up, but just making the most of their time and maturing and just eliminating all these mistakes and whatnot. Because UCLA on paper does have a good team. They have a legit team. And to close, I'll say this. I think UCLA, this loss does not do UCLA any justice, just because I don't think that loss describes them as a team. I think their loss against Lewis was a lot worse, just because I think Lewis is definitely beatable. Long Beach is playing on another level, and based on that match and how they showed a lot of grit, a lot of resilience, and how special they were in terms of all their positions, whether it's libero, setter, right side, left side, middle, you name it. I think, for one, UCLA can look at this loss and say, you know what, we have two options. We could either learn from this loss or let it consume us going forward. So I think for UCLA, they'll be a lot better and a little bit more motivated and prepared for the next time around. And obviously playing at John Wooden Center is a major difference than playing at Pauley Pavilion. I still think there's going to be a good crowd just because when these two teams meet, it's obviously electric. So I think, for one, I feel that UCLA has a lot to learn, but at the same time, there's optimism within that program. And if John Speraw was feeling good after 2 sets, or through 2 sets, despite losing both those sets by a combined 5 points, I think that UCLA can make a whole lot of noise. And despite not being picked to win the MPSF, I think UCLA can definitely do a whole lot of damage. And there's a reason why they are number 2 in the nation so far. Other matchups that happened this past weekend was Ohio State versus McKendree. And McKendree, the unranked McKendree, was able to knock off number 12 Ohio State in 4 sets. I had this on one of my sneaky good matchups from last week, as to me, actually, no, I didn't. I didn't even have this listed as one of my matchups to watch for at all. So, yeah, when I saw this matchup, I was like, whoa, I kind of forgot that MIVA play started. And it looks like conference play did get started throughout the most part, as McKendree did pull off a big win over Ohio State, as the first set, McKendree just dominated Ohio State. They won 25-15. Set 2, Ohio State led 12-10. Then McKendree took control and led throughout the rest of the way. And even though it was tied at 21-21, McKendree just scored when it mattered the most, and they were able to take the 2-0 lead over Ohio State. This was played in Lebanon, Illinois, at the Harry M. Statham Sports Center. So McKendree had the home court advantage, and honestly, I really thought they did well in the first 2 sets. The third set, while Ohio State did not trail, they really strut their stuff. Like, it was tight early on, and then Ohio State just pulled away, and they basically showed the true Ohio State that beat USC a few weeks ago. So Ohio State won that one 25-21. Then in the 4th set, Ohio State led 12-9. Then McKendree went on a 6-1 run to put themselves up 15-13. But Ohio State tied it up, and then they eventually went up 18-17. And it looked as if Ohio State was going to pull off a 5th set, or not pull off a 5th set, force the 5th set. But it was 20-20 at one point between the Bearcats and the Buckeyes. But McKendree was able to pull away in that 4th set after it was tied at 20-20, and that's how McKendree upset number 12 Ohio State. So McKendree was led by Patrick Ross, who had 16 kills. He only had 1 hitting error, and he hit 600, which is very impressive. He was probably their most effective hitter on the night, no doubt about it. Ethan Carroll and Kevin Shuley each added 10 kills. As a team, McKendree only hit 231, which wasn't really the best, but considering the numbers that I'm about to go over defensively, I think there's a good reason for that. McKendree only missed 12 serves while adding 3 service aces. They had a grand total of 12 blocks on the night while chipping in 31 digs, with their dig leaders being Kevin Shuley and Patrick Ross, who each had 7. Ohio State was led by Sean Ryan, who had 14 kills. Jacob Pasteur and Samuel Clark had 13 and 11 kills, respectively. Ryan had hit 455 for Ohio State, which hit 200 as a team, which is not that good. Ohio State had 10.5 blocks, and then they led the dig department with 37 compared to McKendree's 31. Clark led Ohio State in digs with 9, while Noah Plattfoot, their setter, had 8, and then Parker Mikesh had 7 digs. So, all in all, for those of you that remember my interview with Kevin Birch post-game via the Long Beach State match, Kevin Birch said it best. There are a lot of good teams in the MIVA. It's not just Lewis and Loyola and Ohio State. You also have McKendree to deal with. Ball State is having a phenomenal year. And heck, even Lindenwood might do some damage. St. Francis could also do some damage. So the big question is for the MIVA is, which team will be coming up big down the stretch? And which team can stay the healthiest? Which team can have momentum going into that MIVA tournament? Because the team that wins the MIVA tournament is the one that gets the automatic qualifier. Not if you win the regular season. Like, if you win the regular season, that's a feather in your cap. But that's not the big goal. The regular season title is basically just seeding purposes. Staying in the MIVA, we have number 6 Lewis taking on number 10 Ball State. Ball State, the Cardinals. This is probably a team that has been dominating throughout most of the season, as they swept Lewis on Thursday. So, in addition to McKendree upsetting number 12 Ohio State, number 10 Ball State swept Lewis at Lewis, which was very impressive. Like, I would never expect Lewis to get swept. But it actually happened. As set 1, Lewis actually had 3 set points. It was won 31-29 by Ball State, but Lewis just could not put the ball away, as Ball State needed 5 set points, and they actually led 24-21, but unfortunately, Ball State kind of fell apart toward the end of set 1, as, once again, Lewis was able to tie it up at 24-24, sending it to a deuce game, but ultimately, Ball State was able to come out on top, winning the first set 31-29. Set 2, after it was tied 3-3, Ball State just steamrolled their way to victory. Well, not steamrolled, as Ball State led throughout most of the way, or the rest of the way, and Lewis didn't really have too much of an answer for them, as Ball State took the second set 25-22 and a 2-0 lead in the match. Then set 3, Lewis actually led 13-12, but then after that, it was back and forth. Ball State went on a 7-1 run and eventually won that third set 25-20, eventually clinching the sweep over Lewis. Very impressive win for Ball State. It looks as if Ball State's win over Hawaii wasn't necessarily the biggest fluke in the world. Yes, Hawaii did not have most of their players, especially the first time. But Ball State is still having a great year. They were able to beat BYU at Smith Fieldhouse. Their only loss of the season was a 5-set match to BYU in which they got reverse swept. Kind of like how Long Beach State lost in 5 to Penn State at its home gymnasium. So, in terms of the stats, Ball State was led by Angelos Mandelaris, as he had 18 kills. He only had 2 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .593. Caleb Jenis had 17 kills, only 4 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .371. And then Nick Martinsky chipped in 7 kills. Jenis hit .371 while Martinsky hit .385, as Ball State as a team hit .435, which was very impressive. Only having 9 hitting errors on the night. That's really, really good if you ask me. Now this was the stat that really stood out to me. Ball State outblocked Lewis 10-4, which is darn right impressive. And while Lewis barely outdug Ball State 31-30, I think something else that Ball State was effective in was serving the ball. Despite the two teams having 5 service aces, Ball State was aggressive. And while Ball State did have 4 more service errors than Lewis, I think for me the Cardinals were just effective overall. And I think for me, if Lewis did not lose that first set, it's a whole different perspective. But you have to close out those deuce games, and you cannot just put yourself in a situation where you're down 24-21 and then you start to play volleyball. It doesn't work that way. Something else that I frowned upon when it came to Lewis was their kill leaders, as Tyler Mitchum led the way with 15 kills, but that was their only double-digit kill leader. They didn't have anyone else in double digits in terms of kills. They had 7 kills apiece from Kevin Calling, Michael Sack, and John Davis. And then Cole Brilhart chipped in 6 kills. Mitchum hit 522, and then Sack hit 417, and then Davis hit 375. As a team, Lewis hit 266, which wasn't the worst, but it certainly wasn't the best, honestly. compared to Ball State's 435. Like, that is very impressive. I still can't believe they hit that much. On the road, mind you. So, once again, just when I thought Lewis was actually turning the corner in terms of having distributing hitters, they unfortunately took a turn for the worst, and they wound up having Tyler Mitchum having to attempt to carry the team. And that's not ideal. Like, if they're I've said it before and I've said it again, if Lewis is going to have success this season, they're going to have to not bank on one player, like, do the grunt work. They cannot just have one player just carry the team and basically attempt to just try to Steph Curry their way to victory. It doesn't really work that way. They need everyone contributing. That's why volleyball is a team sport. So, all in all, for Lewis, this kind of raised some eyebrows. I was like, how did this team not win? And then it made me think that Ball State could be legit. I think the MIVA is wide open. And Ball State capped off its week from last week as they managed to beat McKendree in 4 sets, which was also very impressive. Lewis, on the other hand, bounced back with a solid 4-set victory over Ohio State. So Ohio State starts MIVA play 0-2, while Ball State is 2-0. To continue on MIVA play and to basically wrap up MIVA play, or the MIVA region, Loyola of Chicago is 2-0 in conference play, as Loyola has a big-time matchup this week against Ball State. Loyola was the favorite to win it all this season in terms of the MIVA, as they will head down to Indiana to take on Ball State, but I'll be getting into that in a little bit later. As Gina says, she loves the Steph Curry reference. Yeah, I kind of had to think of one off the top of my head. Jumping over to the West Coast, or the Pacific West Coast region, we had UC Irvine taking down number 4 Pepperdine at the Brent Event Center in 4 sets. Now, the two teams actually met earlier in the week, as Pepperdine defeated UC Irvine in straight sets in Malibu. I thought this was no surprise, just because Pepperdine is a good team. They're a very strong team. The only problem is they had a little inconsistency against UC Santa Barbara. But against UC Irvine, I was very surprised to see UC Irvine actually pulling out the win. So the first set, Pepperdine really stomped on UC Irvine. It looked as if this was going to be a very expected matchup, as Pepperdine won the first set 25-13. That's how you start a match, and that's basically how you make a statement on the road. But then the next 2 sets, UC Irvine was able to win those next 2 sets by scores of 25-21. UC Irvine didn't really have too much trouble in those sets, as they were able to basically not trail for too long. They only trailed by a combined 1 time. Actually, no. There was only 2 lead changes between sets 2 and 3, and there are only 10 ties combined in those 2 sets. Then in the 4th set, this is where this 4th set was interesting. Pepperdine actually led the whole way in set 4. They led the whole way. However, when they got to set point, and throughout most of the set, UC Irvine just did not quit. They were not out of it. Like, they kept themselves in striking distance, as Pepperdine did lead it by as many as 5, and then eventually at set point, Pepperdine just could not close the door. They had set point at 24-22. It didn't work. UC Irvine got back-to-back kills, and it was eventually a deuce game. Then UC Irvine was able to close out the match with a kill and a hitting error from Pepperdine, as UC Irvine won the match by winning set 4 26-24, and eventually giving themselves the big upset. So for a UC Irvine team that didn't really have too many impressive victories on its resume, they really impressed against Pepperdine. it would have been even more impressive had UC Irvine won on the road, but I guess they saw the film on what happened against Pepperdine in the first match, and they made the corrections to beat Pepperdine on its home floor. And it was very impressive. The fact that UC Irvine was down throughout most of set number 4 and they came back to win it is very impressive. And for Pepperdine, it's just disappointing. It's like, first of all, you're this top 5 team, and you not only lost to UC Santa Barbara, which is kind of understandable, but you lost to a sub-500 UC Irvine team. This was kind of supposed to be your week to bounce back, but instead, you basically collapsed on the road. So, I don't really know what to tell you in terms of that. Like, UC Irvine didn't really have too many great wins going into this match. So, for me, I think this was kind of a bad loss for Pepperdine. And you can't afford to have too many of those bad losses. As it looks like UC Irvine is also starting to get it together, as they were led by Hilaire Heno, who had 15 kills. He hit .346. Cole Gillis had 12 kills, and he hit .345. And then Connor Campbell had 9 kills, only 1 hitting error for a hitting percentage of .533. UC Irvine hit .311, and they had a good service error service ace ratio, as they had 7 aces and 7 service errors, which is not bad. Now, this was a bit of a shocker, in my opinion. So, some of the stats that Pepperdine outdid UC Irvine in terms of those categories really blew my mind and also made me wonder how Pepperdine lose this one. So, let's start with the obvious one. Pepperdine's hitting percentage. Pepperdine hit a whopping .395 in the match. .395. Their worst set was set 2 in terms of hitting percentage, as they hit only .292. But that's still pretty good, if you ask me. But to hit .395 and not win speaks to high volumes of how, what the heck is Pepperdine doing when it comes to trying to put this offense together. Like, I don't understand. When you hit .395, you're winning 95% of the time. But instead, Pepperdine was that lone 5% that just wound up losing. I don't get it. Pepperdine also was led by Jalen Jasper, who had 23 kills. He had 4 hitting errors and on 32 swings, and he hit .594. When your top player is hitting that high of a hitting percentage, you should be winning. Instead, you wound up belly flopping in the 4th set. Also, Jacob Steele, 16 kills, only 3 hitting errors, 29 attempts, for a hitting percentage of .448. How are you losing to a sub-500 team on the road? You're supposed to be top 5, but instead you are laying goose eggs, and you're basically making a mockery of yourself, and you're making the Big West look like it's the Pac-12. And that's not where the stats end. So, Pepperdine actually outblocked UC Irvine 8-4.5. That's also a little shocking. And then another stat, Pepperdine outdug UC Irvine 36 to UC Irvine's 27. They held UC Irvine to 27 digs. And what happened? They still lost. I don't get it. I don't get what this Pepperdine team is. I wish I had known about this loss so I could tell John Speraw about this, but my goodness, Pepperdine, I just don't get it. I really don't. You're supposed to be this favorite to win the MPSF, but you can't even beat probably a losing streak team known as UC Irvine. And this is no knock on UC Irvine. I'm impressed that UC Irvine won. I am actually surprised UC Irvine won the second matchup, but it also goes to show that UC Irvine needed to get this big-time win just because, well, for starters, they had lost quite a number of games in a row to certain teams that they probably should have won against, but instead they wound up losing. So, for UC Irvine, they actually played competitive in some of these losses. Like, they lost in 5 sets to BYU, USC, and UCLA. They had lost 7 in a row going into that matchup against Pepperdine at the Brent Event Center. And that one of those losses was against Pepperdine. So the fact that UC Irvine was able to win this game kind of speaks to high volumes of UC Irvine's grit and resilience, but it also speaks to high volumes of what is Pepperdine doing and can this team actually get it together. My answer to that is I hope so, just because if Pepperdine comes to play like that against other teams, they will win, but if they can't close out sets like they did in set 4, it makes me wonder, is Pepperdine a pretender instead of a contender? Because you look at the MPSF as a whole. UCLA looks legit. They have depth. USC is having a great season. Grand Canyon, with Gianni, with their top players, and Gianni, I forgot his last name because how the heck could I forget, is having a solid season despite losing 2 in a row to UC Santa Barbara. And then BYU, despite having Camden Gianni. Sorry, so Camden Gianni, but you get what I mean. GCU is still having a solid season even though they lost twice to UC Santa Barbara. BYU's trying to figure it out. Concordia is, I wouldn't say been battle-tested yet, but they will be battle-tested this weekend. And then Stanford is having a quiet but still successful season, and you can't sleep on them. So, for Pepperdine, if they don't figure it out soon, the MPSF's going to swallow them whole. Because every team in that conference can possibly win, including Concordia. And I can't believe I'm uttering those words, but even though Concordia hasn't really played the stiffest of competition, and their best win was against UC San Diego, it still could be possible that they could pull off an upset or two. On the topic of BYU, they had the honor of playing UC San Diego this past week, as UC San Diego was coming off of a very tough loss to a Concordia team, which once again was not battle-tested, as BYU was coming in ranked number 11 in the coaches poll at the time, while UC San Diego was barely clinging on to a top 15 spot. So this matchup was rather interesting. The first matchup, there were 2 matchups. UC San Diego actually was trailing by as many as 4 in set 1, but UC San Diego made a comeback, and they actually had 2 set points at 24-23 and 25-24, but they couldn't convert. Meanwhile, BYU only needed 1 set point to clinch the first set over UC San Diego, 27-25. Then set 2, UC San Diego led 19-17, but then BYU battled it out and tied it up at 19-19. Then it was just a seesaw battle. It was Tritons, then Cougars. Tritons, then Cougars. Tritons, then Cougars. Tritons, then Cougars. But then at 23-23, the Cougars scored 2 straight points to win the second set to go up 2-0 on UC San Diego. And to me, winning at Smith Fieldhouse is super duper tough. You're on the road. It's a different time zone. The atmosphere is a whole lot different. The altitude can also play a big role. The crowd is very raucous. It looked as if UC San Diego was not going to win this one. Then in set 3, UC San Diego finally showed up to the party. Then in set 4, UC San Diego was down 20-18, and it looked as if BYU was gonna make the end of the match happen. But then UC San Diego came back, and they needed not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, but 7 set points to take set 4 31-29. Imagine dodging 6 set points, but then allowing them to convert the 7th set point. That is kind of uncharacteristic if you're BYU. It's very mind-boggling if you ask me. And then in set 5, believe it or not, after it was tied 3-3, UC San Diego was in no danger whatsoever as they wound up winning set 5 by a score of 15-11, completing the reverse sweep at Smith Fieldhouse. So UC San Diego in this match very much impressed me as Kyle McCauley, who missed the matchup against Concordia, came back and turned into Superman as he led UC San Diego in kills with 20, while Ryan Ka had 15 kills. Wyatt Harrison added 13 kills, and Logan Clark chipped in 11 kills. Clark had a hitting percentage of .647 with 0 hitting errors, and Harrison had a hitting percentage of .357. Matt Palma chipped in 11 digs, while Blake Crisp added 1 dig, along with his 56 assists. As a team, UC San Diego hit a very impressive .348, and their strong hitting began in set 3 when they hit .500. And then in set 5, UC San Diego didn't even have a hitting error as they hit .667 as they were 8 for 12. They had 8 kills on 12 swings. BYU, on the other hand, was led by David Gardini, who had 23 kills, hitting percentage of .347, while Mix Raminis added 12 kills, and then Capono Brown, through 4 sets, chipped in 11 kills. Mitchell Worthington chipped in 11 digs, while Gardini added 9 digs. As a team, BYU hit .231, and while UC San Diego outdug BYU 42-41, this was kind of the surprising stat, as UC San Diego outblocked BYU 12-7. And then both teams missed a lot of serves, and they didn't have too many service aces. They did get 2 from Kyle McCauley, and they also got 7 digs from McCauley. And then Harrison also chipped in 8 digs as well for UC San Diego. So, while UC San Diego has been having the biggest roller coaster season of its life, they did pull off a big win on the road. And it wasn't just one win. They pulled off both wins, as UC San Diego won the second matchup against BYU, but this one was a little bit different. So UC San Diego, unlike the first match, won the first set 25-22. Then in the second set, BYU flexed its muscle, was in zero danger whatsoever, winning the second set 25-15. Then in set 3, BYU won that third set 25-22, and it looked as if BYU was actually going to close out the match. But then UC San Diego was able to dominate the fourth set. It took them a little while to get it going, but then they won the fourth set 25-15. Then in set 5, this was the interesting set right here. So UC San Diego did not trail, but that number is very misguiding as there were 7 ties. It looked as if UC San Diego was going to dominate its way to victory as they actually led 11-8 at one point in the 5th and decisive set. However, BYU scored 3 straight points to tie the matchup at 11-11 as the tie was capped off by a block at the net. And then we had ourselves a matchup. However, UC San Diego scored the next 3 points, and while BYU did save 1 match point, Ryan Ka added the kill from libero Matt Palma, and BYU was upset yet again by UC San Diego. So, unlike the previous matchup, UC San Diego only had a 2-headed monster as Ryan Ka led the way with 23 kills. He had a hitting percentage of .410, and he also chipped in 9 digs. Kyle McCauley had 11 kills, as I imagine BYU was probably doing their best to try to slow down Kyle McCauley after his big game the previous night. McCauley also chipped in 3 service aces as well as 9 digs. As a team, UC San Diego hit .321, which was pretty impressive. They also had 5 service aces, and they only missed 19 serves, which wasn't bad considering they played a 5-set match. BYU, on the other hand, had a lot of distribution in terms of their kills. Take note, Lewis. as BYU was led by David Gardini and Mix Raminis, who each had 14 kills. Raminis hit 435, while Gardini hit 275, with only 3 hitting errors. Anthony Sherfan added 12 kills, and Gavin Julian added 10 kills, with a hitting percentage of .692. As a team, BYU hit .331, which I'm surprised they hit that high of a hitting percentage and they still lost. The stranger thing is that BYU hit 300 in all of their sets, and they still wound up losing, while holding UC San Diego to hitting percentages of 94 and 192 in sets 2 and 3. Then after that third set, UC San Diego turned on the sprinklers, as they only had, get this, UC San Diego, after the third set, had only 1 hitting error. In set 4, they hit 684, and they had 13 kills, 0 hitting errors on 19 swings. I don't know what UC San Diego did to adjust, but they really did a great job. I don't know if they got Ryan Kahn involved more. I don't know if they got Shane Bennett involved, as he had 8 kills. Logan Clark also had 7 kills. I don't know if they got them involved more, but honestly, Kevin Ring really adjusted well to the BYU game plan, as that was an impressive win, impressive weekend as a whole for UC San Diego, an impressive weekend entirely for the Big West. UC Irvine did have a little bit of a loss. Oh, I'm sorry, not UC Irvine. UC San Diego had a bit of a blemish against UCLA earlier in the week, as they lost to UCLA at the Rimac Arena in 4 sets, but UC San Diego gave UCLA all it could handle. So it's still pretty darn impressive. So that's pretty much that for recapping the entire, most of the week from last week. Since I'm pretty much an hour into this, I also should make note that UC Santa Barbara beat Grand Canyon in 5 sets on the road. And I also should make note that USC swept UC Santa Barbara on Wednesday. And I don't know if it was just a bad case of facing USC, which had been having a great season despite having a loss to Long Beach State, or maybe it was just playing on a Wednesday in general, but I was surprised UC Santa Barbara got swept by USC. So it was very interesting, to say the least. A very eventful week, despite not it being overly gigantic in terms of upsets. Like, there were some upsets, and then there were some great 5-set matches, and there were some really noteworthy matches that I wish I could have recapped more of, but we're already an hour into this, so there's that. Alright, now let's jump on into the AVCA Division 1 and 2 coaches poll, as we have quite a number of good teams on this list, and then we have the unanimous number 1. So 15 through 11 consists of Lincoln Memorial at 15. Yes, Lincoln Memorial. The Rail Splitters are still number 15. I love it. Then Lincoln Memorial is 15. Ohio State is 14. BYU is 13. Stanford is 12. And UC San Diego is 11. 10 through 6 consists of Grand Canyon at 10. Lewis at 9. Pepperdine at 8. Ball State at 7, and UC Santa Barbara at 6. Then 5 through 1 consists of USC at 5, Penn State at 4, Hawaii at 3, UCLA at 2, and the unanimous number 1 team in the nation is Long Beach State. I definitely think that Long Beach State deserves the unanimous number 1 in the most recent coaches poll, just because they really dominated against UCLA, which makes me wonder, can Long Beach State do it again? Can they beat UCLA in a small gym? Not that I'm bashing the John Wooden Center, but it's going to be an interesting matchup on Friday, to say the least. So that's basically going to do it for the AVCA Coaches Poll, and that's a recap of week number 6. We'll take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we come back, we'll have the preview of week 7's NCAA men's volleyball matchups. So you're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all of that sports. We'll be right back after this.
From the shores of the Puget Sound to the rushing waters of the Columbia River, stretching across the Great Cascades, and on IE Sports Radio lives the Northwest Territory Sports Show, hosted by me, Brad Buckingham. On this show, I cover all the great collegiate and professional sport teams that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, I'm talking about the Seattle Seahawks, Seattle Mariners, Sounders, and even the Seattle Kraken. But I can't forget all of that is good in Oregon either. I got the Trailblazers, the Oregon Ducks, the Beavers, even the Timbers, and much, much more. You can listen to the show every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, noon to 1 p.m. Pacific on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' the NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom revved harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely do check out Northwest Territory Sports with Brad Buckingham and Reppin' NorCal Sports with Gina G. Shout out to Gina G, who is still in the chat room. She said she loved my passion when I was doing the whole Pepperdine rant thing. I'm glad you do, Gina, and I'm mainly a passionate guy for the most part. Like, I can sometimes be even louder. Like, there have been other times where I've been animated in the past as well, so just gotta throw that out there. But I appreciate you tuning in, Gina. So now let's get on into segment number 2 of Set Point. So this will just be a preview of this week's matchups for Week 7 in the NCAA men's volleyball world. So let's start with the sneaky good matchups. So they're all on... Actually, no, there's one on Friday, and then the other 3 are on Saturday. So the Friday matchup that is sneaky good is Concordia at Irvine. So both these teams are unranked. Concordia has not really been battle-tested outside of beating UC San Diego, but they did not have Kyle McCauley's at the time, so yeah. And then UC Irvine is obviously coming off of that big win against Pepperdine. So you're probably wondering, why is UC Irvine and Concordia a sneaky good matchup? Well, for starters, this is actually kind of a neighborhood rivalry. Concordia of Irvine versus UC Irvine. It's the battle for Irvine, man. So I think this is going to be a really good matchup, and I always love a inner-city rivalry, and I think it's going to prove to high volumes of which team can come out on top. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this match went at least 4. I think both these teams have a lot to prove. Concordia needs to prove that it can beat someone that's not and this is no knock to these teams, that's not in the NAIA, and they also have to prove that they could beat a team at full strength. UC Irvine, on the other hand, is going to try to keep its momentum going as, once again, they beat a Pepperdine team in 4 sets. That was number 4 at the time. So this will be at the Bren Event Center in Irvine, as UC Irvine will be the home team. But I would not be surprised if we saw more Concordia fans showing up, because Concordia is having a good season. And in addition to that, Concordia does play number 11 UC San Diego on Saturday. But this time, Concordia is going to have to be hitting the road to play the Tritons at Rimac Arena. So to me, I think this is going to be a little bit more challenging. I'm not trying to say UC Irvine is bad, but UC San Diego is now going to have Kyle McCauley. They didn't have Kyle McCauley the first meeting between Concordia and UC San Diego, so if Concordia thinks they're going to be having an easy matchup, they better think again. Concordia is going to have to be prepared for not only McCauley, but for Ryan Kah as well, and then all the other hitters that didn't even crack double digits the second time around against BYU. UC San Diego, on the other hand, will look to try to avenge their loss, as I really think UC San Diego can beat Concordia. My only thing is that they cannot have one player carrying the team. They have to have a balanced diet in terms of their kill distribution. If they can have that, then boy howdy, UC San Diego should be able to either hand Concordia its ugliest loss of the season, or their first or second loss, depending on what happens with UC Irvine. Other sneaky good matchups happening on Saturday is St. Francis at number 4 Penn State. So St. Francis, you're probably wondering, who is St. Francis? They are an EIVA team, and honestly, they're not really the worst team in terms of, the whole conference, but they're not overly impressive, honestly. However, something that does need to be noted is that St. Francis is actually undefeated in EIVA play. So this is actually an early battle for first place, because like St. Francis, Penn State is undefeated in EIVA play, and that could play a big part in terms of possibly getting a leg up on the other team. Do I think this can last forever? Perhaps, but honestly, this is basically going to be a tough battle for St. Francis, considering, well, for starters, they're playing on the road at Rec Hall. That's basically Penn State's bread and butter. They have not lost a match at Rec Hall, so St. Francis is going to have to come out guns a-blazing, and while St. Francis has won 5 in a row, they're just gonna have to slow down all of Penn State's big time hitters, whether it's Toby Ezeonu whether it's Cal Fisher, you name it. So I think it's going to be a chess match right there. And Mark Pavlik is a fantastic coach. So, and I also think that Penn State has been battle-tested. So we'll see if St. Francis can come out with a fiery passion at Rec Hall. But I think this is going to be a nice little battle for Pennsylvania, because this is St. Francis of Pennsylvania, not St. Francis of Brooklyn. And then the last noteworthy matchup to watch for in terms of sneaky good matchups is Loyola of Chicago at number 7 Ball State. So Ball State is having a phenomenal season. Ball State is currently number 7 in the nation. Their only loss was a reverse sweep to BYU. Other than that, Ball State has been perfect throughout most of the season as they play Loyola of Chicago. Loyola of Chicago and Ball State are both undefeated. However, you kind of have to admire Ball State's win over Lewis a whole lot better. And then also beating McKendree was also impressive, especially since it was on the road. So all in all, for Ball State, they do have the home court advantage, but I would not underestimate Loyola. I think Loyola is starting to play some better volleyball. I wouldn't say they're playing their best volleyball, but I will also say this. I think Loyola, having been the favorite for this season, kind of has a target painted on their back, and they have to be very cautious. And the same can be said for Ball State. Now that Ball State is having so much success, no one is going to sleep on Ball State. So I think this is going to be a great MIVA matchup, and this is what conference matchups are all about. And this kind of goes back to what Kevin Birch said to me a couple weeks ago about the MIVA. There are a lot of good teams in that conference, and there's not one weak team. And then going back to the EIVA, Mark Pavlik said that the EIVA is not basically your granddad's conference. This is basically an improved conference. Like St. Francis of Pennsylvania looks good. Penn State obviously looks good. NJIT is still solid, and I'm going to be really interested to see how the Highlanders play. And then you just can't sleep on the other teams like George Mason, Princeton, and Harvard and whatnot. So I think this is going to be a interesting conference play. Although Penn State was the heavy favorite, I still think they can't let that go to their head. Going into the matchups, the noteworthy matchups for this week, we have to give the match of the week to these two teams for the second straight week. And I hate to do this. I really hate to give this match of the week to the same two teams, but match of the week for week 7 is number 1 Long Beach State at number 2 UCLA. It has to be. This is basically a little bit of a grudge match for UCLA as they did get swept against Long Beach State at the Pyramid. However, UCLA has a chance to avenge their loss as this will be the last time these two teams play. UCLA has an impressive roster, but we'll see if they can take advantage of that against a talented Long Beach State team at home. Long Beach State, on the other hand, they're going to have to come out of their comfort zone just because, well, playing on the road is one thing, but playing in a small gymnasium could be another. I'm not trying to diss the Wooden Center or the John Wooden Center, but honestly, it's not the same. It's kind of the equivalent of playing at the Gold Mine at Long Beach State. But I think it's just going to be a barn burner. We'll see if Spencer Olivier or Alex Nikolov can have big nights as opposed to Clark Godbold having his big night in the first meeting. I don't expect UCLA to have 20 digs or 20 or less digs like they did. So, honestly, I feel UCLA and Long Beach State could be a barn burner. As we say hello to Pierre Moss in the chat, he says, have a great show, Teran, the best in the business. I appreciate Pierre. I was just talking about NJIT and how they're undefeated in conference play and how they'll probably be playing Penn State next week. I think they do play Penn State next week, but regardless, that's not for another week. So for me, UCLA, Long Beach State has to be match of the week. Again, I hate having to pick the same two teams, but it doesn't get any better than that. It really does not get any better than Long Beach State versus UCLA. Number 1 versus number 2. So I hate to pick Long Beach State for the 5th straight time as my or was it the 4th? I think it was the 4th straight time as match of the week. But honestly, they're the number 1 team, and I think that's the most intriguing matchup for this week. I may look beyond the rankings for next week just because I want to say Long Beach State plays Stanford, and I'm not trying to say this in a negative way. I don't know if Stanford can keep up with Long Beach State, but I have been wrong in the past, and this has been a weird volleyball season as Hawaii did lose twice to Ball State, and Ball State's just having an amazing season. And then USC is number 5 in the nation. So, yeah. So that is my match of the week right there. Another matchup to watch for on Friday is number 8 Pepperdine at number 10 Grand Canyon. This is going to be a fun little matchup right here just because it's an MPSF matchup as MPSF play, like I said, is basically wide open. And this is the first matchup of conference play in the MPSF. And it comes against 2 teams still trying to find their identity. Pepperdine trying to rebound after that hideous loss to UC Irvine, and then Grand Canyon coming off of 2 losses to UC Santa Barbara. So, to me, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to say the least. And honestly, if Pepperdine can get 2 wins on the road, that would be very impressive. Grand Canyon is a good team, as Camden Gianni is a freaking beast. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Camden Gianni is arguably the best player in the MPSF. And that's no diss to the other players in the MPSF. I just think, for me, Gianni has had a great story. Obviously, for those that don't know, the dude had open heart surgery after he collapsed in practice, and now that he is back on the court, well, this was back in his freshman year, not just recently, but now that Camden Gianni is back on the floor and he is doing big things, the sky's the limit for Grand Canyon. So I really think that Camden Gianni can lead Grand Canyon to possibly at least 1 win. You never know with Grand Canyon. Like, Grand Canyon has had the knack for pulling off some big wins, so we'll see what happens. As Gina also says that she agrees that Stanford might not be able to keep up with Long Beach State. However, they had 1 good win, and you never know with Stanford. And you have to love the whole story with Stanford, just because, well, obviously, for those of you that don't remember, last year was supposedly Stanford's last season because the Stanford University Athletic Department was going to cut Stanford men's volleyball out of the picture just because of financial issues. However, everyone was able to raise enough money and petitions to keep Stanford men's volleyball, and I was happy face, and everyone was happy face. So, yay! So, continuing on with kind of the Pacific matchups of noteworthiness, number 13 BYU hits the road to God's Country, a.k.a. Santa Barbara, to take on number 6 UC Santa Barbara. So, this is kind of BYU's final tune-up match before conference play, and they're playing a very tough UC Santa Barbara team. Very blazing UC Santa Barbara team after winning 2 matches on the road at Grand Canyon. And honestly, UC Santa Barbara had such a gauntlet last year. They were at USC, and then they were also in Arizona to take on Grand Canyon. It was ridiculous. So, it's good to see UC Santa Barbara getting back to the Thunderdome, and I think they kind of need it. Honestly, I feel UC Santa Barbara is the better team. Nothing against BYU, but this is a BYU team that lost half its roster to graduation. And while David Gardini is doing a great job, I don't think he can carry the team by himself. Like, it's not as bad as Lewis's situation where they're just banking on Tyler Mitchum, but for me, I think BYU is kind of showing not really their true colors, but kind of their true team and how they're in a rebuild and how they're not supposed to be as good as most people think. But it's still early, and if BYU can get one win against UC Santa Barbara, I think that could go a long way going into MPSF play next week. And then the last matchup to watch for on Friday, and this will not only be happening on Friday, but on Saturday and Sunday as well, is number 15 Lincoln Memorial at number 3 Hawaii. Now you're probably wondering, Teran, why is the number 15 team versus number 13 or number 3 team a noteworthy matchup? Y'all are probably thinking I'm crazy, but I'm not, because Lincoln Memorial, the rail splitters, if I'm not mistaken, they are undefeated. I'm not kidding you. The rail splitters are undefeated in terms of its overall season. And it's quite impressive. If I remember correctly, they are 8-0, and they are indeed 8-0, and all of their games surprisingly have been at home. They were supposed to play Lewis, but unfortunately that got canceled. So, to recap Lincoln Memorial's wins, they've beaten Purdue of Fort Wayne, they beat King, they beat Loyola of Chicago, which was number 11 at the time, they beat McKendree, they beat Erskine, they beat Emmanuel, then they beat Queens, and then they beat Limestone. However, this is kind of where Lincoln Memorial has to step out of their comfort zone. They are playing 3 matches at Hawaii. At Hawaii. So, how will LMU beat Hawaii? For starters, Lincoln Memorial is one of the top blocking teams in the nation, along with Hawaii. I was told that these two teams are both top 3 in blocks per match in terms of the nation. So LMU has that going for them. But they're going to be playing in a hostile environment, and we don't know if Hawaii will have Chaz Galloway. It's not certain if Chaz Galloway is going to be back for the team, but it looks like Hawaii still has a good chunk of their team back. It looks like they have all their players like Guillermo Voss, or Guillermo Voss, and Jakob Tella, and many other players. Last week, Hawaii played LIU in a 3-match series, and Hawaii was able to win all those matches, albeit the third one they had to win it in 4, and then the first matchup, Hawaii kind of struggled out the gate. So for me, I think this will be a fun matchup, just because Hawaii will be getting a little bit of a test, but so will Lincoln Memorial. And this will go to show if Lincoln Memorial is for real or not. Because if they are for real, then this will definitely prove themselves as a either contender or a pretender. But if not, then we will have to see or reevaluate if Lincoln Memorial deserves to be number 15. LMU is also playing some other tough teams. I also mentioned this last week that Lincoln Memorial is playing Ohio State in a few more weeks. And then they have the Lindenwood Invite, which they are playing a plethora of teams. And I will be interested to see if LMU can actually make the NCAA tournament. I want to say, some have been saying that LMU or Lincoln Memorial has been an independent team, but I kind of don't believe that, just because they do play they actually do play in a conference. They play in the IVA conference, and they play in the IVA championships, which will be on April 22nd and 23rd. And the first and second round is going to be jam-packed and lumped into one day. So This will be quite interesting. I want to say LMU is in the Carolina Conference. So there's that right there. So that's that for LMU versus Hawaii or Lincoln Memorial. And they are a good story just because this was actually their first national rank in program history. And it's actually their best start in program history at 8-0. So for Lincoln Memorial to do that is quite astounding. And they're kind of that little feel-good story and kind of that underdog that we all want to root for. And who doesn't love a good underdog story? Jumping on into Saturday's matchups. So, once again, Saturday is basically the same as Friday, as Pepperdine plays at Grand Canyon, BYU plays at UC Santa Barbara, and then Lincoln Memorial plays at Hawaii. Like I said, Pepperdine Grand Canyon is important just because it's an MPSF matchup, and now that it's conference play for both those two teams, we have to find out which team is for real and which team is fake. Like, for me, this is kind of the prove yourself matchup for both of these teams. And if it weren't for Long Beach State versus UCLA, I think Pepperdine Grand Canyon would be match of the week for sure, by a landslide. But unfortunately, Long Beach State and UCLA have another matchup with one another. So they kind of steal the spotlight of match of the week. But now that conference play is getting closer and closer for a lot of these teams, not just in the MIVA or the EIVA, but now in the MPSF and soon to be in the Big West Conference, I think it's going to be a fun time in terms of conferences, and I think some of these conferences are actually wide open. I think the MIVA is wide open, the MPSF is wide open, the EIVA can be wide open depending on what happens with St. Francis. And something else to note is that Penn State has not lost a set in EIVA play. So we shall see if Penn State can get challenged this week. And then the Big West Conference is going to be something else to watch for, just because the two-headed monster is Long Beach State and Hawaii. Both those two teams were picked to tie atop the Big West Conference standings. But it all depends on which team is trending in the right direction and which team is still trending in the right direction but not trending in the right direction as much as the other team. So I think Big West Conference play is going to be an all-out war because UC Santa Barbara is playing some of its better volleyball outside of that USC loss. And then UC Irvine is kind of underrated. UC San Diego is starting to pick it up. And you can't sleep on Northridge as well. So we'll see what happens going forward. But that is going to do it for the preview of Week 7 in terms of the NCAA men's volleyball matchups. And that's going to do it for Set Point this week. It is that time, ladies and gentlemen, to drop that beat. Because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any point of the day, I appreciate you. Big shout out to the chat room, Pierre Moss and Gina G, or AKA Reppin' Debay. I really do appreciate you two tuning in. I know Pierre's a busy guy, but I appreciate Gina hanging in there for the 90-plus minutes in terms of this show. Definitely do check out Reppin' the NorCal Sports tomorrow or whenever it goes on. It never disappoints. For everyone here at iSports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourselves a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball that's going to be happening. And I will see you most likely on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Yes, SoCal Supreme Sports Show will return on Friday. Peace, y'all.